when the pursuit of shortcuts, viral fame, and self-validation goes catastrophically wrong, even the most ordinary moments can turn deadly. These 6 people learned that truth in the dumbest ways imaginable. It was October 15th, 2019, when Tyler Brooks made the decision that would end his 19-year-old life in the basement laundry room of his University of Michigan dormitory. Tyler was the kind of freshman who always seemed to be running on empty, not just his phone battery, but his energy, his patience, and increasingly, his judgment. A computer science major from suburban Detroit, he had that restless intelligence that made him think he could outsmart any system. His friends knew him as the guy who would spend hours finding a 10-minute shortcut, the type who bought the cheapest version of everything and then tried to modify it into something better. That night, Tyler was 3 energy drinks deep into what should have been a simple programming assignment. His phone had died hours earlier, and the cheap $3 replacement charger he had ordered online was taking forever to bring it back to life. Sleep-deprived and jittery from caffeine, Tyler's mind fixated on a half-remembered conversation about voltage and charging speeds. The basement laundry room felt like a tomb at 2:15 a.m. Fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Tyler stared at the 220-volt dryer outlet, his tired brain convinced this was the solution to his charging problems. He pulled out his pocket knife and began stripping the wires of his knockoff charger, the plastic insulation peeling away to reveal copper underneath. Tyler wrapped the exposed wires around the dryer outlet prongs with the confidence of someone who had never truly understood the difference between being clever and being reckless. The moment he plugged in his phone and the connection was made, 220 volts of electricity surged through the poorly constructed charger. The current hit Tyler's hands first, traveling through his phone and into his body. His muscles contracted involuntarily, his grip tightening around the device that was now killing him. The electricity coursed through his chest, disrupting the delicate electrical system that kept his heart beating in rhythm. Within seconds, his heart entered ventricular fibrillation. Tyler collapsed onto the cold concrete floor, his body convulsing as the sustained electrical shock burned through his hands and sent his heart into cardiac arrest. The basement fell silent except for the hum of the fluorescent lights and the electrical current still flowing through the modified charger. 3 minutes later, Tyler Brooks was dead. A sophomore doing late-night laundry discovered his body 20 minutes later, the modified charger still plugged into the dryer outlet like evidence of a fatal experiment. Campus maintenance had to shut down power to the entire building before paramedics could safely approach the scene. The investigation revealed that Tyler had bypassed every safety feature built into modern charging cables. His $3 shortcut had cost him everything. The university responded by installing tamper-proof covers on all high-voltage outlets in common areas and launching a campus-wide electrical safety education program. Tyler's death became a cautionary tale whispered among students during finals week, a reminder that some shortcuts lead nowhere good. His parents established a scholarship in his name for computer science students, hoping that future generations might channel their curiosity more safely than their son had that October night. His roommate later found Tyler's laptop still open to the programming assignment he never finished, the cursor blinking endlessly in an empty code window. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. A computer science student killed by his misunderstanding of basic electrical principles. In the end, Tyler Brooks had been right about one thing. The 220-volt outlet could indeed charge a phone faster. He just never got the chance to see it work. It was December 8, 2020, when 24-year-old Jessica Martinez made a decision that would cost her everything. The ambitious social media manager from Minneapolis had built her career on understanding what made content go viral, but her relentless pursuit of online fame would lead her down a deadly path. Jessica was the type of person who lived and breathed social media trends. Standing 5 feet 4 inches with an infectious smile, she worked for a local marketing firm while building her personal brand. Her bubbly personality and willingness to try anything for content had made her popular, but it also made her reckless. That winter evening, Jessica found herself alone in her suburban Minneapolis home. Her roommate had left to visit family for the holidays, leaving Jessica with her phone, her ambitions, and a dangerous idea. She had been following an 18-hour intermittent fasting trend, and her stomach was growling with increasing intensity. Earlier that day, Jessica had been scrolling through social platforms when she stumbled upon videos of people attempting extreme cold food challenges. The views were astronomical. and Jessica saw an opportunity. She decided to create her own version, something nobody had attempted before. At 7:30 p.m., Jessica opened her freezer and pulled out a 12-pound frozen turkey. The bird was solid as a rock, stored at -10 degrees Fahrenheit. Most people would have recognized the obvious danger, but Jessica's hunger and desperation for viral content clouded her judgment. She set up her phone to record and grabbed a kitchen knife. The plan was simple: chip off pieces of the frozen turkey and eat them raw, creating the ultimate extreme cold challenge. She began hacking away at the frozen bird, creating chunks harder than ice cubes. Jessica forced the first piece into her mouth, immediately feeling the shocking cold against her teeth and tongue. The frozen meat began causing frostbite damage to her oral tissues within seconds. Her mouth started going numb, but she interpreted this as adapting to the challenge. Driven by her empty stomach and adrenaline, Jessica continued shoving larger pieces of frozen turkey into her mouth. Each chunk was roughly golf ball sized, and the extreme cold was systematically destroying nerve endings in her mouth and throat. The numbness became Jessica's enemy when a large piece of frozen turkey, about 4 inches long, became lodged in her throat. She couldn't feel it properly. The frostbite had damaged her ability to sense the obstruction, and she continued trying to swallow more frozen meat. Each additional piece pushed the original obstruction deeper into her airway. The combination of swelling from frostbite damage and physical blockage created a perfect storm. Jessica's breathing became increasingly labored, but numbness prevented her from understanding the severity. Within minutes, the frozen turkey had completely blocked her trachea. Jessica began choking violently, her body's reflexes kicking in too late. She clawed at her throat, trying desperately to dislodge the obstruction, but numbness made it impossible to locate or remove the frozen meat. Jessica collapsed on her kitchen floor, her phone still recording. The lack of oxygen quickly took its toll, and within 6 minutes of the initial obstruction, she lost consciousness and died from asphyxiation. Her roommate discovered the tragic scene when she returned home unexpectedly. The 911 call came too late. Paramedics arrived to find Jessica's lifeless body surrounded by chunks of frozen turkey and her still recording phone. The medical examiner's report revealed the full tragedy. A 4-inch piece of frozen turkey was found completely blocking her trachea, while extensive frostbite damage was documented throughout her mouth and throat. The combination of extreme cold exposure and mechanical obstruction had created an unsurvivable situation. Jessica's death sent shockwaves through the social media community and sparked widespread discussions about the dangerous lengths people will go to for viral content. Her final video, never posted, served as a grim reminder that the pursuit of online fame can have deadly consequences. It was March 22, 2020, when David Rodriguez's determination to prove himself would cost him everything. David, a 43-year-old accountant from Richmond, Virginia, had always been the numbers guy, precise, methodical, and proud of his attention to detail. But when COVID-19 swept through the economy and his firm laid him off after 15 years, his world turned upside down. His wife Maria had been asking him to finish their garage renovation for 3 years, and now, with time on his hands and his pride wounded, David saw this as his chance to show he was more than just a man who pushed papers. For weeks, David immersed himself in YouTube tutorials, watching video after video about framing, drywall, and construction techniques. His confidence grew with each tutorial. He started telling Maria he was basically a professional contractor now, dismissing her suggestions to hire someone, or at least get help from their neighbor Tom, who actually worked construction. The stubborn streak that made David excellent at balancing books also made him refuse assistance. This was his project, his chance to prove his worth beyond spreadsheets and tax returns. When Tom offered to lend him a pneumatic nail gun, David jumped at the opportunity, though he'd never used power tools beyond a basic drill. That Sunday morning, David set up in the garage with his borrowed equipment. The compressor hummed loudly, set to maximum pressure at 120 psi. David figured more power meant better results. He never bothered reading the manual. After all, how complicated could pointing and shooting be? At 10:15 a.m., David positioned himself awkwardly beside a 2x4 stud he was trying to attach to the garage wall. Holding the board steady with his left hand, he stretched around it with the nail gun, trying to nail from the front at an uncomfortable angle. His methodical nature had abandoned him in favor of impatience and overconfidence. The moment David pulled the trigger, the excessive air pressure caused the tool to kick back violently. The gun bounced off the wood surface and fired again, this time sending a 3.5-inch framing nail directly into his chest. The nail penetrated his sternum and tore through his heart's left ventricle. Blood immediately began filling the pericardial sac surrounding his heart, creating a condition called cardiac tamponade. David's heart couldn't beat effectively as pressure built around it. He staggered backward, the nail gun clattering to the concrete floor as he clutched his chest in shock and confusion. David collapsed against his workbench, sending paint cans and tools crashing to the ground. His meticulous nature, which had served him so well in accounting, couldn't help him now as his heart went into arrest. Within 90 seconds, his blood pressure dropped to 0 and consciousness slipped away. Maria found him 2 hours later when she brought his favorite sandwich for lunch. The paramedics arrived within 6 minutes of her frantic call, but despite their advanced life support measures, David couldn't be revived. The medical examiner later determined the nail had created a 2-inch tear in his heart muscle, an instantly fatal injury. OSHA investigators discovered multiple safety violations at the scene, including the dangerously high air pressure setting and David's lack of proper safety equipment. The incident prompted manufacturers to add new warnings about pressure settings on pneumatic nail gun packaging. David Rodriguez, who had spent his career ensuring every number added up perfectly, had made one calculation error that cost him everything. His desire to prove himself as more than just an accountant had ended in a suburban garage, surrounded by the tools of a trade he'd never truly learned to respect. The man who could balance million-dollar budgets couldn't balance his own safety with his pride. It was November 8, 2021, when Rebecca Martinez's competitive spirit would lead to a devastating end in her Nashville kitchen. The 35-year-old elementary school teacher had always been the adventurous one among her college sorority sisters, constantly pushing culinary boundaries to impress her longtime friends during their monthly virtual gatherings. Rebecca possessed an infectious enthusiasm that made her beloved by both students and colleagues. Her bubbly personality and determination to excel at everything she attempted had earned her the nickname Super Teacher at Lincoln Elementary. However, this same drive for perfection would prove fatal on that autumn evening. The afternoon had started innocently enough. Rebecca had been sipping wine while preparing for the virtual cooking competition with her sorority sisters, a tradition they had maintained since college. The alcohol had loosened her inhibitions, making her more daring than usual. She decided to attempt Bananas Foster, a dish she had never prepared before, determined to create something spectacular for her friends watching via Zoom. Her small Nashville apartment kitchen was poorly ventilated, with only a tiny window above the sink. Multiple burners had been running for hours, creating a sweltering environment. The cheap electric stove she relied on made flame control unpredictable. At exactly 7:20 p.m., Rebecca heated her largest skillet with butter and brown sugar, while her friends cheered her on through their computer screens, emboldened by their encouragement and the wine. She poured half a cup of rum into the pan, far exceeding the recipe's requirement. She wanted to create a spectacular flame that would leave her friends amazed. The moment Rebecca tilted the pan toward the electric burner's glowing coil, disaster struck. A massive fireball erupted from the skillet, far larger than anything she had anticipated. The alcohol vapor had been accumulating in the poorly ventilated space, creating perfect conditions for a flash fire that spread with terrifying speed. Flames immediately engulfed Rebecca's loose cotton blouse, the fabric igniting like kindling. The fire quickly spread to her long brown hair and face as she stood frozen in shock. Panic overtook her rational thinking, and she instinctively ran toward the sink, but her frantic movement only fanned the flames, making them burn with increased intensity. The synthetic blend of her shirt began melting onto her skin, creating third-degree burns across 60% of her upper body. The superheated gases she inhaled seared her throat and lungs, causing immediate respiratory distress. Rebecca collapsed in her narrow hallway, her airways severely damaged and filling with fluid. Her sorority sisters, still connected through the video call, watched in horror as their friend disappeared from view. They immediately contacted Nashville Emergency Services, providing the dispatcher with Rebecca's address while desperately calling her name through their screens. Firefighters arrived within 4 minutes of the emergency call, but they found Rebecca unconscious with devastating burns and severe smoke inhalation. The paramedics worked frantically to stabilize her condition before rushing her to Vanderbilt University Medical Center. Despite the medical team's best efforts, Rebecca's injuries proved too severe. The respiratory failure caused by her burned airways and fluid-filled lungs could not be reversed. She was pronounced dead 3 hours after the accident, leaving behind a devastated family, friends, and students who had adored their energetic teacher. The fire department's investigation revealed dangerous levels of alcohol vapor throughout Rebecca's kitchen, confirming that the accumulated fumes had created conditions for the flash fire. The combination of poor ventilation, excessive alcohol, and inexperience had proven lethal. Rebecca's tragic death prompted her school district to implement safety protocols for virtual cooking activities. Her story serves as a sobering reminder that kitchen safety should never be compromised. It was July 4th, 2022, when Marco Johnson's quest for the perfect fireworks finale turned into his final act. The 33-year-old mechanic from Denver had always been the type who believed bigger was better, a philosophy that served him well, fixing engines, but would prove catastrophic with explosives. Marco stood 6 feet tall with calloused hands that spoke of years working under car hoods. His boisterous personality made him the life of every party, though his stubborn streak often worried his wife, Sarah. That Independence Day evening, with beer flowing freely at their suburban backyard gathering, Marco's showman instincts kicked into overdrive. Earlier that week, he'd acquired 20 illegal M80 firecrackers from a shady dealer, convinced these would create the spectacular finale his annual 4th of July party deserved. Despite Sarah's concerned protests and his guests' nervous laughter, Marco spent the afternoon in his garage, methodically removing individual fuses and binding the explosives together with electrical tape. His plan seemed foolproof. One long fuse would ignite all 20 simultaneously, creating what he boasted would be heard 3 blocks away. The alcohol had amplified his confidence while dulling his judgment. When Sarah begged him to reconsider, Marco waved her off with his characteristic bravado, insisting his mechanical expertise translated to understanding explosives. At 9:30 p.m., with neighbors gathered expectantly around his backyard, Marco proudly displayed his creation. The bundle resembled a small stick of dynamite, which unknowingly it essentially was. He lit the fuse expecting 10 seconds to retreat to safety, but his modifications had created an unpredictable burn rate. Instead of 10 seconds, Marco had 3. Panic flashed across his face as the fuse disappeared faster than anticipated. He attempted to hurl the bundle away, but the combined force of 20 M80s detonated while still clutched in his right hand. The explosion, equivalent to a quarter stick of dynamite, instantly vaporized his hand and forearm. The devastating blast sent bone fragments tearing through his chest cavity, puncturing both lungs and his heart. Shrapnel peppered his torso while the concussion ruptured his eardrums and caused severe brain trauma. Marco collapsed onto his lawn, blood pooling beneath him, as horrified guests screamed for help. Within 4 minutes, the mechanic who'd spent his career fixing things had succumbed to traumatic injuries and massive blood loss. Paramedics arriving on scene discovered his severed hand 30 feet from where he'd fallen, a grim testament to the explosion's power. The blast echoed for miles, prompting ATF investigations and stricter county fireworks enforcement. Marco's family later sued the illegal dealer, though no legal victory could restore their loss. His 3 young children would grow up without their father's weekend garage lessons. His death served as a stark reminder that some things simply cannot be improved through modification, and that expertise in one field doesn't guarantee competence in another. Marco Johnson's final 4th of July became a cautionary tale about the deadly consequences of combining alcohol, arrogance, and explosives in pursuit of momentary glory. The suburban mechanic who'd always believed he could fix anything had finally encountered something beyond repair, the irreversible damage caused by his own reckless ambition and desire to impress others. It was August 14, 2023, when Troy Mitchell's overconfidence turned a routine cleanup into a deadly mistake. The 31-year-old tree service worker had spent over a decade mastering his craft, earning respect throughout rural Virginia for his precision with dangerous equipment. Troy was known for his meticulous safety standards on job sites, always insisting his crew follow proper protocols to the letter. That sweltering afternoon, Troy surveyed storm damage in his wooded backyard. Several beer cans sat empty on his porch as he assessed a massive oak branch suspended 15 feet overhead, caught precariously in another tree's limbs. His usual methodical approach had been compromised by alcohol and the desire to save money by working alone instead of calling his regular crew. Troy's personality shifted when working his own property. The same man who demanded safety harnesses and proper rigging techniques at work became reckless at home. He grabbed his well-worn chainsaw, ignoring the low bar oil warning light that flickered ominously. The equipment that had been his trusted companion for years was about to become his executioner. At 4:45 p.m., Troy positioned himself directly beneath the hanging branch, violating every safety rule he enforced professionally. He pulled the starter cord, and the familiar roar of the two-stroke engine filled the humid air. Reaching awkwardly overhead, he pressed the spinning chain against the trapped wood. The physics of the situation worked against him instantly. The awkward angle caused the chain to bind in the dense oak, creating the most dangerous scenario in chainsaw operation. Kickback. The saw's nose caught and Newton's laws took over with devastating efficiency. The chainsaw erupted backward with tremendous force, the spinning chain racing toward Troy's exposed neck at 30 miles per hour. His reflexes, dulled by alcohol and compromised by the awkward position, failed him completely. The razor-sharp chain struck his throat with surgical precision, severing his carotid artery and tearing through his trachea. Blood erupted from the wound in rhythmic spurts, painting the fallen leaves crimson. Troy's hands instinctively reached for his neck as the chainsaw tumbled from his grasp, its engine still screaming. The arterial bleeding was catastrophic, draining his body's 5-liter blood supply with terrifying speed. Within 90 seconds, Troy's vision darkened as his brain starved for oxygen. His knees buckled, and he collapsed among the scattered branches he had been clearing. The chainsaw finally sputtered to silence, leaving only the sound of blood pooling on dry earth. Troy's body fought desperately against the inevitable, but physics had already determined the outcome. The severed artery continued pumping his life away until his heart finally stopped beating 4 minutes after the initial kickback. 20 minutes later, his neighbor investigated the abrupt silence. The discovery scene was horrific. Troy's lifeless body surrounded by blood-soaked leaves, the chainsaw lying nearby like a discarded weapon. Paramedics arrived within minutes of the 911 call, but their advanced life support equipment was useless against such massive blood loss. Troy had been dead for nearly half an hour, his body already cooling in the Virginia heat. The investigation revealed a tragic irony. The same man who preached chainsaw safety had died violating every protocol he enforced. His employer, devastated by the loss, implemented new policies requiring safety equipment, even for off-duty use. Troy's wife discovered his body had lost nearly 3 quarts of blood, emphasizing the severity of arterial wounds. His death became a cautionary tale throughout the tree service industry, proving that experience without proper precautions means nothing when physics and human error collide with fatal consequences. Don't let these shocking stories be the end. Click the next video for even more unbelievable tales of human stupidity that will completely blow your mind.